Hi, and welcome to the I Teed Myself podcast. My name is Matthew Miniman, and this is episode 38, Deep Dive, Server Basics. So, servers. What are they? Well, servers can be defined as somebody who gets your order constantly wrong, people who make less than minimum wage, those who society depends on to function currently, or you can define them as a computer that offers a service that can or is used by multiple individuals or services. So a server is essentially just another computer. That's all you need to know. It's really just another fucking computer. If you're confused by that concept, let me say it again. A server is just a computer. In fact, modern servers are really no different than your normal desktop computers. They actually operate or work off of the same OS architecture. Didn't used to be the case. Like the desktop OS and the server OSs were vastly different. Now, hardware-wise, servers do have a little bit more of a robust or different hardware layout, but as a general multi-purpose user, you're probably not really going to notice that on your side. Servers are servers because of their hardware. That's really the big difference. But again, you're probably not going to notice that difference from a surface level. So, what is the big deal? What is the big deal about servers? Well, servers have a lot of resources to utilize. And so when you are pushing or providing whatever service or function through this server, it typically has a much broader service scope. Because if you have a server that is serving out something that hundreds of people, thousands of people are using, you're going to want to have more resources. A laptop isn't going to be able to provide enough CPU or power or whatever to give those individuals what they need. So you need something that's a little bit more robust, which is why servers are the way they are. Modern servers are typically hyper-converged, and we'll go into this much deeper in another deep dive. But hyper-converged just basically means that there are a lot of servers on a single piece of hardware. This is known as VMs. These servers are known as VMs, and this architecture basically means that companies can save money because servers aren't utilizing 100% of the CPU all the time, and so they can pack a bunch of servers onto a single set of hardware. That is effectively how most server infrastructure works today. So, what does this mean for you? As a user, as somebody who's working on stuff, who's browsing the internet, and just wants to fucking watch their Netflix. Well, servers come in all different shapes and flavors, all different sizes, all different kinds. And so, when you have a server, and if you were going to create a server and you want to host a service, you have to decide how you want that to be done. So that's kind of step one when you're deploying a server, is you've got to figure out how that's what you're doing. You got to figure out how it's going to be served up, what you're doing, and why. And so there are lots of ways. There are many ways to do really anything that you want for services or servers. But typically, if you're offering something up, you're typically doing this through your own hardware or through your own data or whatever. And so it needs to be provided in a way that makes sense for your server. And so there are a lot of different, at the beginning, there are a lot of different packages that you can use to kind of create your server and get it off the ground really quickly. One of the things that I was sort of in charge of or told to do when I was first coming into IT was creating a LAMP server, which is Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. And it basically, that is the basics of a lot of files, or of a lot of website servers out there, is that they have those four things in the background, which if you're offering a service that is exposed to the internet or something like that, you're probably using a LAMP server. And so when you are deploying an environment, or when you're deploying a service, that is one of those things that you kind of have to decide on how and what you are doing. So you can't just like say, deploy me a website. I mean, you fucking can, because there's Wix and shit like that out there where you can pay them to build you a website. But if you were going to build a website from scratch, just absolutely no help from the outside, you would need to figure out how you want to serve that up. Because it's not as easy as saying, oh, well, just install Apache and then you've got a website. Because technically, it is that simple. But your website isn't going to have anything about you or what you want it to have on there. There's a lot of background stuff that you're gonna want to have and you're gonna need. So when you are doing something like, we'll just take a website as an example, just a normal website that's hosting data, you need some sort of, well, you need your operating system on the server. We'll start with that. You need your operating system on the server, and your operating system today really only comes in like 2-3 different flavors. So there's Unix and Linux, which are effectively the same operating system. I mean, they are different, but they are effectively the same from an operation standpoint. Then there's Windows. Sorry, Mac, you don't get a fucking OS server. I don't care if you think you have a server. Apple, you don't have servers. Apples are not for the enterprise environment. Suck my dick. Anyway, the entirety of the server operating system really depends on how you install it. So there are different distributions of Linux, there are different distributions of Unix, and then there are really only a few different flavors of Windows, a Windows server. And so you decide how best you want to operate it on, how best you want your operating system to work, and you have to kind of decide that. There are both positives and negatives to all of these different operating systems. Windows is a little bit more UI friendly, so if you constantly need to use a UI with whatever you're doing, user interface, then you'll probably want to go with that. However, with Linux or Unix, if you are a command line buff, you know your command line, you know how to operate in that operating system very well, you may decide just to use that. And so it really depends. There are benefits and drawbacks to both of those things, such as Windows eats up more CPU just as an operating system. Linux is not very user friendly, and if you make a mistake, fucking Linux doesn't give a shit. You're done. So if you wipe your C drive, if you wipe your data partition on Linux, you're fucked. So there, like I said, there are both positives and negatives to each operating system. But that's kind of the first thing you decide when you're building a server, is what operating system you want on it. I mean, we're assuming that you already have the hardware. Hardware is a whole different fucking discussion that we can have later. But if you're building a server, you're probably having the hardware already provided to you. You can buy a server from any popular manufacturer. You can make your own server if you really fucking want to. But there are just gobs and gobs of different ways to get a server. And let's assume that you have a server with hardware already, because I don't want to get into that right now. Hardware is difficult with servers sometimes. So we've installed the operating system, and for the sake of argument, we're going to go with probably the most popular operating system out there for really any service, which is going to be Linux. Because Linux doesn't have that much CPU overhead, it is installed kind of as a bare bones operating system, and based on your distro, can really have a wide range of functions and features that you can install on there. However, because it is just a base system, it doesn't have everything installed in there by default. When you are installing or when you're creating a service, a website on there, you have a few options after you get the operating system installed. So you need to host the website. So you need a service installed on your server that has the ability to push your website out to the internet. Basically, what it does is it puts your website or the ability to host the website on a specific port on your computer, and that port is what people will use to connect to from the internet. And so when you're installing a website on the server, you have a few options of what service you use to host that website. You have something like Apache, which is great. It's owned by Java, and so Apache it's got a lot that it does, and it can do a lot more. There's a lot of plugins for it, but it does have some of its own problems, not least of which are vulnerabilities and a lot of many issues with updates and things like that. But Apache is very widely used, and that's probably why you have so many issues with vulnerabilities. But it's very widely used, and it's very useful. And if you can use their support, data, it's great. That is one thing that I'll have to say about Apache, is that they have a giant backend for support. Like, above any other solution, if you need support, if you need enterprise level support, you're not quite sure how to do something, or there's a specific error with how you're doing something, Apache does offer that support out, and it's great. As opposed to something like Nginx. Nginx is another website hosting service, and it is great. You install this on your server, and it's very simple, very easy to install. It has tons of plugins for it, but doesn't necessarily have the same level of support as Apache does. Nginx is really free and open source, and their support is the community, which I don't know if you've ever talked to a normal person, but there's a large percentage of people who are just fucking morons. And so if you have community level support, you're trusting that the people who are providing you the support know what the hell they're talking about. Now, most people who post on forums care enough about what they're doing to do it right. So they'll say that. But if you are in enterprise, you may not want to trust on the kindness of strangers. Just saying. But if you're hosting your website as a person, those are two of the options that you have. There are tons more. You can create your own HTTP service. There's very easy ways to do that through Python or another scripting language if you really want to. But yeah, you use that. Now, your website, modern websites, if you're going to host a modern websites typically have some sort of advanced features or advanced display settings. And so they don't just go off and use a single type of language when they're hosting in a website. By default, when you're hosting your own website, it is using something called hypertext or HTML, hypertext language. It's hypertext markup language. And basically, HTML is a method of typing in text that displays information in a specific way. And HTML is not necessarily code, because you're not making a program out of it. You're hosting a website, but it is effectively, it is code-like or code-like. It's got enough that has to do with coding and enough similarity to it that, yeah, you're basically writing code when you're writing HTML. That's where I come down on that. There's a lot of people who say HTML is code. There's a lot of people who say HTML isn't code. Anyway, this isn't really in the balance of servers, but yeah. So when you serve up your website, you're going to have to decide how you want it served, and you're going to have to decide what kind of details you have in there. And by default, everything is hosted by HTML. That's how your browsers are going to first define and review and look up your website and display it. But then you're going to have certain things like if you want graphics or plugins or things like that make it look sharp and look like a modern website. You're going to have to do things like add PHP to your server or add CSS to your display or add JavaScript or so on and so on, and then renderers and things like that. There are plugins and massive amounts of decisions that you have to make along and up and down the way. And this is where servers can get really confusing. And this is why people basically, when they hear the word server, they stop thinking because there's just so much that they can do. But that is, in essence, the whole thing is that servers have the capacity to do just about anything. They do a very limited scope. They provide a single service or function to a wide range of folks. And that is their key purpose. Now, if you are working on a utility that is on a server, the biggest thing to remember is that you are not necessarily working on the same type of system as what you're normally operating on your computer, because servers are much easier to provide those services out on, and they're much easier to install and manage, or can be. But you as a user aren't going to be able to use them as well or easily or quickly if they aren't being used from your laptop or your workstation or whatever. So, there are a lot of tricks and ways to get that working. A lot of companies utilize what are called remote apps, where they serve up the app in such a way that it seamlessly looks like it's on your laptop, but it's actually on the server. Other folks do remote desktop sessions. Other people serve it up through, a website. And it really just depends on how your organization is working, how your workflow looks like. So when you are operating a utility that is on a server, the things you need to remember are effectively you have two storage locations. Now, as a service on a website, it might be easier to differentiate the two because you have a web browser and then you have your desktop. You have all of your other applications on your desktop. And that is a very easy line to draw. You can understand that if it's not in this web browser, it's not on the server. That makes it really easy. However, if you're serving it up through something like Remote App, or let's say you have QuickBooks and you have a QuickBooks app installed on your computer, but the QuickBooks server is somewhere else, that can get kind of confusing to understand. And I get that. And basically what that means is you've got some networking involved in between your server and you just need to be able to keep track of what's on the server and what isn't on the server. This is actually I have a real life example of this where I have a finance chief who doesn't understand where they are saving their stuff, and they constantly have to call in and say, I don't know where my files are. They were here yesterday and I opened them and now I can't find them. And it's because they're either saving them to the server directly and then wanting to look at them on their desktop, or they are saving them on their desktop and then looking for them on the server. And it's really difficult for them to understand the fact that they have a redirected drive. They also have a home drive, and they're just not looking for it in the right place. So those are some of the difficulties surrounding, understanding about where servers are and how servers work and all of that. But the thing to kind of ease folks like that, if you're somebody who isn't really strong in IT, who isn't really strong in computers, and is kind of actually afraid of them, first off, I have to say, you're really brave for making it this far in my podcast. And two, I have to say, you all you need to do is calm down and remember that a server is just another computer. It is just another computer that you're using, but you're only using a very small portion of it. And when you are operating on that computer, you are being given a very limited scope of action. Now, your permissions and things like that might allow you to do more than probably what you should. But if you just remember that your server is the place where the operations happen and where you put your stuff, that makes it a lot easier and makes it simpler to deal with. So, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to use a server. Don't be afraid to do all that. Now, one of the things that you can't just do is servers can't just do anything. I mean, some can. And like if you're using a Windows operating system, they do have the capacity to have these pre-installed packages. Like Microsoft has an entire suite of Active Directory. Active Directory does a lot. And you can just install it with your server and then have it running. It's fantastic. It takes like an hour to deploy and maybe a little bit more to get everything connected and configured the way you want. But Active Directory, because of the way that Microsoft has packaged it, it's there and easy to just deploy. But that is not the case with the vast majority of things that servers do. So you can't say just, hey, do this new thing with a server that we've never done before and expect it to be done very quickly. As demonstrated in our website exercise, there are a lot of decisions and a lot of different aspects that you have to make a call on before you even start the installation process. You can't just say, do this and it be done. That's just not fucking possible. You have to plan. You have to design. And that's the right way to do it. Now, you can just fucking say, hey, do this, and then, deal with all of the different decisions as they come, but you're going to be playing catch up a whole lot. Now, the thing I'll end this on is that when you are creating servers, or really any workstation or anything, any computer, one of the things that you should be doing as a best practice is your servers, your computer names, everything should be named, should have a specific naming convention. You should have something that a user or somebody who's assisting you or an IT person can come in, see what the server is, and just get a general sense of what it does. This is because you want to do this because in a situation where you are dealing with an emergency, you do not want to have to explain what the fuck Chubby Hugs does. Like, the server Chubby Hugs, what does it do? Can you tell me? It awkwardly hugs people with a boner? Because that's what it sounds like it does. When I first started in IT, it was very popular to have your servers named after superheroes or cartoon characters or science fiction books or, whatever the fucking theme that the original IT director had. It was very popular to do that. And that is no longer the case. You should no longer ever do that. Just for the simple fact that if you ever have to be in an emergency, you don't want to have to tell people what a server does. So you name it something that can tell you, like for your Active Directory domain controllers, you name them with DC somewhere in the name. So like we do organization acronym dash DC dash number 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. And that gives you a really good idea of what that server does. Or you can do something like apps for a server that serves apps. Or you can do a server that says engine for Nginx that serves up Nginx, an Nginx website. I don't know. You come up with it. The possibilities are endless, but don't fucking use a name where you're going to have to explain it to somebody in an emergency. And especially if you have, I know this particular podcast is not very professional, but fuck, if you have somebody walking through your organization and you have to explain Chubby Hugs as an awkward boner, that's going to be kind of embarrassing for you in a professional standpoint, and possibly even in an HR incident. All right, guys. I hope you have a great day.